The effects view is like a multi-effects module where we have an EQ, compressor, then two configurable effects, configurable via the drop-down menu here, and then finally a reverb. Now there's a power button for each individual module, and we get a reduced set of controls in the play view. We have the EQ controls, power button for the compressor, ratio knob, and then the two configurable effects, and then the reverb. And finally, we can swap these two configurable effects by dragging them with these handles. Now I'm going to play a little part I have with no effects on it. I just want to point out in the edit window, I have some LFO modulation happening on the frequency of the noise filter, so that creates some nice movement in the sound. So with that in mind, let's explore the effects. With the EQ, we have a low shelf band, and then we have two peak bands where we have Q, gain, and frequency, and then a high shelf filter. So we can adjust these to taste to start with. All right, so I've thinned the sound out a little bit and I've got a nice bright quality to it. Now you'll notice that there's an SC button over here, and that's a sidechain button, and it routes the EQ to the input of the compressor optionally. So if I press that, we won't hear it now because it'll be taken out of the main signal path and routed so only the compressor hears it. So when it's engaged, it's kind of like having the EQ off. So let's leave it on and leave it out of sidechain mode now. Now the compressor is typical dynamics reduction. We have a threshold where we can determine at what point the compressor kicks in and then how much we want it to compress the signal. The attack, meaning how quickly it's going to start compressing once it reaches the threshold, and then how quickly it releases the signal once it no longer crosses the threshold, and then a makeup gain control. So let's explore this. So as I dial the attacks slower, we can really hear the attacks getting through, and I like that. It's compressing the body of the sound, but letting the sharp transients get through. Now let's try it with sidechain mode. So it influences how the compressor reacts, and with the pre button, we can put it before the equalizer. I'm going to leave it like that. Now we have configurable effects here. The first is a delay unit, which is a stereo feedback loop, and it's used to create an echo kind of effect. We can sync it to tempo with this over here, and when this is not in sync mode, we can adjust the delay manually in seconds and milliseconds. But let's sync it there. This is how much of the delays are going to be generated. We can set a cutoff frequency so that each delay that's generated is filtered. We can pan them, and then we can mix the dry and wet signal together. So that sounds nice. Now, we have additional effects. We have distortion next, and it's a way of overdriving the signal. We have 3 different types of distortion, and this sets how much of the signal we're driving into this distortion unit. We can shape the tone. The mix knob allows us to blend in as much of the overdrive as we want, and then the volume controls the overall output. And let's try that before the delay. Now after that we have a phaser, and this colors the signal by removing frequency bands from the spectrum of frequencies. So it's created by changing the phase of the frequency of a signal, and it uses an all-pass filter, and then it adds that, it combines it with the original one. And let's explore the parameters here. The depth knob sets the intensity of the phasing. This sets the center frequency. Feedback means how much we want it to oscillate, and we can blend with the mix control. And we can optionally sync it to tempo. Now after this we have vintage chorus and chorus, and the vintage chorus includes variations of chorus and flangers, which we'll look at separately, but the chorus control over here is a way of creating a unison doubling type of effect by creating slight timing and pitch variations. So the idea here is that the depth controls the amount of the modulation, and then we have a fat button here which controls the number of voices in the chorus effect. After this, we have a flanger, which colors the sound. It creates a kind of false pitch effect by creating an additional signal of varying delay to the original signal. So it's similar to what we looked at, but it's got a slightly different quality. It's got a kind of robotic type of sound to it. And again, it can be synced to tempo. After that, we have a tremolo effect, which creates a panning type of effect. So that's interesting, syncing it to tempo. We have auto wah and wah, and they basically enhance a frequency band around a varying center frequency using a bandpass filter. Now I'm going to turn off the LFO for this just so we don't get distracted with what this is doing. So with this, we have the auto wah, and the difference is that with the wah effect, the center frequency varies at the rate that we set over here. And with the auto wah, it's kind of done for you. The variation is controlled by the amplitude of the incoming signal. Let's look at this where we have a bit more control. I like it out of sync mode. It gives you a bit more of a feel of not being perfectly locked to tempo. And then after this, we have a notch filter, which is kind of another band of EQ. And it does the opposite of the bandpass of what the wah does. It attenuates the frequencies in a band around the frequency that we set here, and then it leaves the rest outside of it unchanged. So this controls the center frequency, and then this determines how much of it we're going to cut away. I think I'm going to go back to a wah effect. Put it before the delay, and then we'll explore the reverb, which is a way of creating reflections of sound on walls in a room. So we have different size rooms that we can choose from over here, and then how we want those reflections to decay, how they're spread apart, and we can EQ them a little bit and mix it with the unaffected signal. So that's the effects view.